John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned, because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail.
Hey, everybody, I want to welcome you to the show. This is a very important show. I want to introduce you, if you don't know, who Reverend Dr. Connie Stomper is. I want to tell you who Reverend Dr. Connie is, because what we're talking about, you just heard me do a show with Ryan about purpose. This is part 2. And what I mean by part 2 is, how do we view our lives? How is it that taking a higher perspective, how is it that if we take a higher perspective, we can actually go higher? Why am I saying that? Because today we're going to be talking with somebody that created something so powerful, just so you know, Soul Musings, but even more importantly, helps people globally understand not just what it means to be in a space of a higher perspective, but what Soul Musings can help us do and understand and show others how they can reach that goal. Dr. Connie, Reverend Dr. Connie, great to have you here and doing this show with you. Boy, I'm telling you, I just shared a story about a group of young people that I work with, and how they inspire me to higher perspectives in so many ways. But I wanted to ask you, this show today is really higher perspectives, higher quality of life. I want to ask you out of the gate, talk about higher perspective from where you sit and what it is in your life that helped you recognize how important that is.
Okay, so I think that's a good place to start, because we want to be on the same page about what higher perspective means.
Yeah.
And, for me, there's a quote by a philosopher, Pierre Chardin, which is, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience." Meaning we are actually, in our essence, souls that have the divine within us. So we're more than our mind, our bodies, our emotions. And actually, I think if there's certain experiences in life where, whether it's a sunset, listening to Beethoven's music, which is glorious, even though he was deaf when he created it, the energy that comes forward with loving, not just the emotion, but the energy. When my niece was small and we talk on the phone, and I'd hang up and I'd say, "I'm hugging you. Do you feel that?" It's like, yes, she felt it miles away. And I have another great example story of a part of us that's beyond the mind, emotions, feelings, which is a good friend of mine was having heart surgery and very much wanted me to be there when he woke up, because it's going to be a long surgery, and wanted, when he's back, friendly face, somebody loved. So of course I arranged it with the doctors. They called me when he got out and was going to come to, and I drove to the hospital 3:00 in the morning. Of course, that's how that works, right? Pitch dark.
Of course.
And I'm parking on the street parking, and there's meters, so I put enough money that I can be there for hours and hours and go to the room, see him. He goes back kind of in and out of consciousness, and I sit there, meditate, be with him if he needs something. And all of a sudden he says, hadn't been talking like this, "Connie, you need to take care of your car. You're getting a ticket." And I looked at the clock, and it was like 10:27. I said, no, I've got till a couple of hours till somebody else comes here. Don't worry about it. So long story short, I go out after somebody comes to be with him. And of course, there's a ticket. And it wasn't because of the meter. It was because there was a space in a line where I wasn't supposed to park past. But I'm like, what was the time of the ticket? 10:27, exactly when he looked at. there's a part of us that's way beyond the God. He was not even in full consciousness.
Yeah.
And yet a part of him was awake. And so to me, it's the part of us that's a higher perspective is the soul part of us, which is our nature, is joyful, peaceful. That's another, that we're one in spirit, that we're not separate, that in that spiritual part, we're really all connected. And also that our souls are eternal. The whole essence of who we are does not die. So that's where I'm coming from with higher perspective.
And I love this because I work with women mostly, but some men in addiction recovery. I've been doing it for it's like a long time now, like 30 something years for alcohol and longer than that for drugs. And one of the hardest things for people to do is to get a grip on that higher perspective, right? And so there are a lot of things that you can do in treatment and recovery, but how does somebody like me and others help them see the world outside of their immediate feelings of trauma,
Right.
disbelief, right? Now, I bring that up as an example, but right now, this message goes beyond people in addiction and recovery because this now goes beyond the world you want to create, doesn't it?
Well, and one way I think about that is if we think of a mosaic, if we're down close to it and just in the midst of it, we see different pieces that are different colors, and you can't quite make out what all this means until you get higher, right? And you see the whole, and then all of a sudden there's a picture. And for me, what that picture is that if we are souls having a human experience, there's a reason we're here. And for me, that reason is in my experience, is to use everything that's been designed in our life to expand, for learning, to grow more into that loving, peaceful, joyful person that we really are. And Rumi says it's not like we have to seek for love. We just have to let go of everything that's not that.
Yeah.
So if we start with that assumption that there's an essential goodness in us, it's not like striving for something outside of ourselves. It's just looking at something saying, is that loving, peaceful, joyful? Can I let go of that and move in a more deep part of myself that are those things?
I'm so glad you brought up Rumi. When I started to branch out and explore the world and ask myself, do I really have to keep living like this? I was given certain books, and certainly when they handed me Rumi, I just threw it, right? Because I'm like, I can't even say the name. But then I started to read, and I thought, where does this guy come from? Right? You know where? The higher perspective.
Right.
Right?
From a point of view, yeah.
Point of view, higher perspective. And there are many. Right now, the audience is having a debate about my background, right? They're probably going to debate your background.
Right.
They're debating whether or not that statue is Buddha or Kuan Yin. It's really interesting.
Yes.
But I love when people say, why? Why do you have that there? So let's talk about this.
Okay.
Embracing a higher perspective. You see, we can logically and linearly look at it. Einstein did. Yeah, problem can't be solved at the level of creative. No, he wasn't talking about getting a Vitamix. He was talking about, you got this human problem. You're trying to solve it at the human level. No, right? So this is now a great scientist embracing a higher perspective. Let's talk about what that means from where you sit and how the breadcrumbs take us to a new life.
Well, to me, it's like if we're going to assume something, and I wasn't in addiction, but I was in a lot of chronic pain. And at the time where I had left traditional religion and was kind of agnostic, atheistic, and I said a prayer. It's like, dear Lord, I don't know if you exist, but if you do, I don't want to live like this anymore. And what came forward were all kinds of solutions to the pain. But more than that, what came forward was that connection with the divine that actually heard that prayer and showed me that there was a different way to live. One of the main things about living from a soul's perspective for me that can give our lives a deeper meaning is that it's all been designed for us for our learning and growth. Everything that happens is for us if we use it that way. We can use it to enhance our positive approach to life, to enhance our joy. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's challenging, because maybe we need to learn compassion or what the effects of our actions are on others because we experience them. But in the spiritual sense, for our souls, it's all designed for that soul expansion. Yeah. And, like one of the metaphors I like to use is of spiritual, like Olympics, because, athletes, when they meet a challenge, they don't recoil from it.
Yeah.
If I'm a high jumper and I mastered a certain level and then my coach raises the bar and this is really challenging, I don't go, what are you doing? I just did that. I was really good. Well, and now it's like I welcome that opportunity for mastery. In this case, actually to go higher, but also that it's not going to be instantaneous. There's a muscle building. And I think there's a way we can see our lives as building our spiritual muscles, to go further, to go higher, to do more, and mostly to be more of that loving that we are.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up the athlete thing. I consider myself an athlete. I play a sport. When I say it, people laugh. It really is a sport. A championship table tennis is like a real sport. No, and it's not pickleball, but it's a real sport. And It's so funny you mentioned that. I was playing at the Korean church here because they play on certain nights of the week. And I am one of the few English speaking, clearly English. But I had one of the gentlemen who was watching me play offer to coach me. Mm-hmm. And I watched what he did. So he wasn't correcting something for me to be mediocre.
Right.
He was showing me something that in my decades of playing the sport, I didn't know I was doing. Now, I will tell you that in life, we get help from people that look and say, I can help you get to the next level. Mm-hmm. Reverend Dr. Connie, that's what you're talking about here today. We're talking about a message that could truly help people get to a level. I don't care what it is they want to get to. Isn't that what today's show is really about?
Well, sure. It's about how do you use experiences in life to lift. And what does that mean? It's like being in a place that sees it from a different perspective. You're talking about helping you get better, but one of the things I appreciate about a higher perspective of the soul is that for me, it was an escape from a perfectionism in terms of how I identified. We can certainly go for mastery. We can certainly go for excellence. But on the physical level, we're not designed to be perfect.
No.
In the essence of who we are already perfect. So we don't have to strive for something we already are, but we can let go of the fact that, the body's designed not to be that perfection. And we don't have to be, for me, it was a tyranny of like, how do I meet that standard? And there's always something that is not right. And it's like when I finally identified with, no, I'm the perfect part as the soul. I don't have to expect the material level to conform to that. It's not designed for that. It's designed for our learning and growth. And just like the athlete too, if it doesn't go well, they don't say, okay, I'm never going to make it. They say, okay, what do I need to do? I keep practicing. It's not an automatic.
Exactly.
In fact, the way we react or see things, I think of as kind of a rut, like a karmic rut. Like if you think of a road that's been muddy and there's wheel tracks, right? It's the default is so much easier just to go back to how we react, how we, whether we use things against each other, whether we think we're superior to others, whether we just get upset and angry about stuff. And it's like it takes a conscious practice to say, I'm going to take dominion in my life and I'm going to carve a new rut. Every time I'm faced with that kind of situation, I'm going to make a new choice from this higher perspective of something that's more loving, peaceful, joyful. And I had an experience in working this where I finally got to a situation where all of a sudden I found myself automatically, like there was a new rut to go in. It automatically took me in a different direction. It was like too much trouble to go back into all of the negativity. Like why even go there when I have this higher road to travel?
I mean, this is why we're talking about this today, because, the idea of a higher perspective, even if you really don't know what it is, and I want to talk to you about what we could say to people to get them pointed in the right direction.
Okay.
I wish somebody like me doesn't have a blueprint. Somebody like you is able to help people better. Because for me, I'm more of a step in a pothole and then figure out that the only way out is really a higher perspective. It's really more than that. It's having a belief in something that you can't see, but that has this eternal light that's also within you.
Right.
What do we say to people now? Because many people listening to this say, I'm too old, I can't do it, I don't. But we're not talking about something that goes away. It's something that's available to all of us if we believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right. And we're going to live from some assumptions. So why not live from that positive assumption that we are that goodness and we are that divinity? Because if we don't allow for that possibility, we're not going to be in touch with it. Just making that assumption gives us access to that. And to me, the first thing in terms of getting in touch with that is just recognizing when you might be experiencing that already. Whether it's, like I said, listening to music, some people it's being in nature, some people it's looking at their beautiful child, some people it's laughter. It gives us a perspective. We're looking at it from a different point of view and seeing the humor in life. There's ways of consciously, spending time with that part. This world is so full of noise and busyness, and that draws us outside of ourselves. So one way of just connecting into that is spending time with that part.
Yeah.
Being in the quiet, whether it's, meditating, whether it's just, being with yourself, touching into, who you are, your feelings. It's like there is a deeper part, but we need to make contact. Like any relationship, we need to spend time there.
Yeah. I got asked a question not too long ago because Russell Wilson is a quarterback now for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he was also Seattle. I knew his uncle. And so I knew Russell, I knew his uncle, who was my boss. And we spent some time, I was talking about him. And one of the things I discovered about Russell Wilson is he has this higher perspective view. It doesn't matter what you think about him as a football player. So when I was asked on an interview on a show, who do I think would make the greatest difference in football? Like, they always ask me questions they don't think I'm going to answer. And I just looked at him and I said, Russell Wilson. And they said, no way. And then he said, why? I said, because he lives from a higher perspective. You're going to get all of his talent, but you're going to get much more than that. And what's the end game for that? Absolutely the way that's turning out. And that leadership and what he exudes represents what you and I are talking about today. But here we live today, and I want to ask you this. Let's summarize this for our audience. Because whether it's Russell Wilson, whether it's you, Reverend Dr. Connie, whether it's me, whether it's, one of the people I work with, maybe it's somebody you don't know. We all have one thing in common, don't we?
Well, we've got our divinity and our humanness. And
exactly.
It's like we're all part of that same situation in this world. And if we're connected in the oneness, I think that's also important because we understand that we're not separate. Separation can be one of the most painful things, is thinking that we're the Lone Ranger or we're different, but we are all in this, experience together. And if we want to live in a more, higher perspective, higher quality of life, it's like if we're constantly looking for the good in everything, if we're constantly looking at experiences, how is this for me? How is this an opportunity for me to grow and expand spiritually? Not the kind of victim mentality that we can fall into in this life. This is happening to me. I have no agency. We always have an agency in terms of choosing how we respond to something. And if we start connecting to that inner place that is love and joy and peace, we can start living from that place, not dependent on what's going on outside of ourselves. I mean, say that again. It's like we are those qualities, and we're conditioned to say, okay, if this is happening, I'm going to feel sad. If this is happening, it makes me angry. What if I wanted to just live in that peace no matter what? I think of like a fountain, which can be like our fountain of love and joy and peace. Does it care who's looking at it or what's going on outside of it? Does it all of a sudden go, I don't like you, I'm going to close down? Not because of what's happening, deserving the love or our appreciation, or we approve of it or we condone it, because we want to live in a space that helps us maintain that love and joy and peace. It's not dependent on the outside. Is that automatic? Is it easy? No, it takes practice. It takes intention. And it's not about being perfect. It's about having an intention to live a more uplifting life. And this perspective allows us to do that by seeing everything as designed for us to use in a way for upliftment and expansion in our loving and our peace and our joy. It's a choice. It's always a choice.
Every day I get an experience. This morning I was stopping in and getting myself some espresso before I came in.
Right.
And I stop at the same place and I have a little card, And this morning, young woman was there who went off to school and came back, and she re-upped my card. And she said, do you want to use the free today? I said, no, I want to use it next week for Thanksgiving and Gratitude Week.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at me and she said, gratitude. I said, yes. And she said, I'm having a hard time with that. And then she asked me, how do you do it? And I said, you know what? I'm going to give you something really simple to do, and I would like you to try it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, one of my mentors gave me an exercise almost 40 years ago, and it was simply to say 70 times a day for 70 days. Thank you. You fill in the blank. God, angels, spirit, whatever you want it, universe, fill that in. And she said 70 times. I said, yes, just keep saying it over and over in your head. And then every once in a while, she said, but do I have to be thankful for it? No, just keep saying it. You see, why is that important to do?
So for me, it's a habit of mind,
There it is.
And even when you get, that practice like the athlete with spiritual muscle, and for me, when I've worked with that, with gratitude, which is absolutely another great tool, if I'm not experiencing my gratitude, I'm just grateful for the part of me that doesn't experience the gratitude. It's like you just go to the level where you can go to the gratitude. It's about staying in that place in consciousness. It's not about whether everything is conforming to what we want to see in the world.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about a number of things, but I want you to just kind of bring us full circle, if you will, today.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is more than just a conversation about it. This is an opportunity for us to make a change. Even though it may be a small change, this is an opportunity to choose something else. What's your personal message? How can we invite people to the party to choose a higher perspective?
Well, one of the things I practice is just saying, how is this for me from a spiritual? How is it, an opportunity to expand? I even ask myself, what's the most positive thing I can tell myself about this? What's the most motivating thing I can tell myself about it? And for me, if I embrace that perspective, it's again, my old friend Rumi says you can live life as if everything is rigged in our favor. Because to me, it is on the spiritual level, it's all designed for us to grow into a deeper sense of loving joy, peace that we actually are, and become more aware of that.
Yeah. This is one of those conversations that You don't have to have a right or wrong mentality.
Mm-hmm.
This is simply to choose. And there are tools that will continue to share, how you do that. But you can do things a little bit at a time here. I think the most important part about what we're talking about is we can literally embrace the notion that there is a higher perspective.
Right.
And then in the moment that we have to choose, higher perspective or not, we can choose that.
Exactly. We have that ability to make our lives what we want it to be.
Yeah. And if I think, if you're asking yourself, why would I do that? Why wouldn't you do it?
Well,
Try it. Right. I mean, you get that question. Why do I want to do that? Right.
Well, and I call the show Soul Musings and exploring and embracing because it's give yourself that freedom to just play with it and try something different if that's not
Exactly.
your habit. But until you actually embrace it and do it, you're not going to get the results. So look at what resonates for you. Take the pieces that we've talked about that you can use, and then see what the results are. Be a spiritual scientist, so to speak.
I love it. Reverend Dr. Connie, how do people find out about you? Please give them your website and let folks know what you're up to.
So my website is soulmusings.org. And what I'm up to is I do counseling, I do workshops around all of these principles, and you can find out more there. And eventually we'll get into the work that I do with the community and consensus and the larger picture of how do we uplift and contribute to a more positive, loving world.
Wow. Thank you so much for today. And for those of you out there, remember, we're talking about a higher perspective, higher quality of life. And I love what Reverend Dr. Connie said. Let's have a little experiment. Try it. You may love it. Thank you so much for joining me here, Dr. Connie. Thank you all out there for tuning us in, turning us on. Thank you, Emily, for pushing all the right buttons. And
God bless
thank you. I'm telling you, right? And for all of you out there, remember, there is something that you have. There is a freedom that each of us has. And some people say it's the only freedom, and that's the freedom to choose.
Mhm.
Choose a higher perspective. We'll see you next time.